The message came on a quiet Tuesday morning in 2157. Dr. Emily Foster had been drinking her coffee, reviewing the usual deep space signals at NASA's Communications Center, when her computer started beeping wildly. At first, she thought it was a mistake. After 20 years of listening to space, most signals turned out to be nothing more than cosmic noise. This was different. "Someone get in here," she shouted, her hands shaking as she adjusted her headphones. The signal was clear, too clear. It wasn't the random patterns of a dying star or the steady pulse of a pulsar. This was a message, repeating over and over in a mathematical sequence that could only be artificial. Within an hour, the center was packed. Scientists huddled around monitors, talking in excited whispers. Colonel David Wright from the Space Defense Force stood behind Emily, his face stern as he watched the patterns dance across the screen. "Can you decode it?" he asked. Emily nodded slowly. "The base mathematics are universal. They're using prime numbers as a foundation. Give me time." Days turned into weeks as Emily and her team worked around the clock. The message was complex but elegant, like a poem written in mathematics. As they cracked each layer, their excitement turned to worry. "It's a warning," Emily announced one morning, her face pale. The room fell silent as she played the fully translated message. "They are coming. The void seeks warmth. Hide your fire. We failed. We are the last of the Centauri Alliance. Our stars grow dark. Our worlds freeze. You are next. Hide. Hide. Hide." Colonel Wright immediately called an emergency meeting with world leaders. In the White House's Situation Room, Emily explained what they'd found. "The message came from a dying civilization," she said, pointing to star charts. "Their entire system is experiencing impossible temperature drops. It's like something is eating the heat right out of their stars." "That's not possible," said Dr. Robert Hayes, a quantum physicist who'd been called in to consult. "You can't just remove heat from a star." But the evidence was undeniable. Through their most powerful telescopes, they watched as stars in the Centauri region dimmed one by one, like candles being snuffed out by an invisible hand. The first real sign of trouble came from Mars Colony. Alice Chen, the colony's commander, reported strange readings on their thermal sensors. Dark spots were appearing in the space around Mars, areas where the temperature dropped to near absolute zero. "It's like looking at holes in space," Alice reported, her voice crackling over the radio. "The spots are moving, growing. There, the transmission cut off. When they restored contact 6 hours later, Mars Colony was gone, not destroyed. There was no debris, no explosion. The entire base, along with its 1,000 colonists, was frozen solid. The temperature had dropped so low that the air itself had turned to liquid. Back on Earth, panic started to spread. People could see it in the night sky. Stars were going dark. Not all at once, but one by one, like a slow wave of darkness spreading across the cosmos. Colonel Wright took charge of Earth's defenses, but how do you fight something that eats heat? How do you defend against an enemy that doesn't attack with weapons, but with the cold of space itself? Emily worked day and night, studying the original message, looking for any clues they might have missed. The Centauri Alliance had fought this thing, and lost. But maybe they'd left behind more than just a warning. She found it buried in the mathematical patterns, a small sequence that seemed out of place. When she finally decoded it, she ran straight to Colonel Wright's office. "They left us something," she said, spreading out her notes. "The Void Seekers, that's what they called them. They're attracted to certain types of energy. Advanced technology, fusion reactors, anything that produces concentrated heat. Our technology is like a beacon," Wright realized. "We've been advertising our presence across space without knowing it." As they talked, the first reports came in from the outer solar system. The dark spots had been sighted near Jupiter. The Void Seekers were coming, and Earth had only days to prepare. The night sky grew darker as more stars winked out. Humanity's greatest test was about to begin, and no one knew if they would survive what was coming. But as Emily looked out her office window at the bustling space center below, she saw something that gave her hope. People weren't running. They weren't hiding. They were working, planning, preparing. Maybe that's what made humans different. When the universe said, hide, they chose to stand and fight instead. The first wave was coming, and humanity's fire was about to be tested against the coldest force in the universe. Dr. Robert Hayes stood in his lab at MIT, staring at readings that shouldn't be possible. The temperature sensors on his desk showed numbers so low they broke the laws of physics. Outside his window, snow fell in Boston. It was July. "This isn't normal cold," he muttered, adjusting his thick winter coat. "This is something else entirely." His computer beeped with an incoming call. Dr. Emily Foster's tired face appeared on the screen. Dark circles under her eyes showed she hadn't slept in days. "Robert, are you seeing this?" she asked. "The temperature drops are spreading. It's not just space anymore. They're hitting Earth's atmosphere." Robert nodded, pointing his tablet camera at his instruments. "These void seekers, they're not just making things cold. They're removing heat itself. It's like they're hungry for it." As they talked, the lab's lights flickered. The backup generators kicked in with a low hum. All across the city, power stations were failing as the cold crept in. But it wasn't the machinery freezing. It was the energy itself being drained away. In the next room, Robert's team had built a special chamber. Inside, they had captured one tiny dark spot, no bigger than a coin. They watched through thick glass as it floated, sucking all heat from its surroundings. "Look at this," Robert said, turning his camera to the chamber. "When we feed it energy, it doesn't just absorb it. It processes it somehow, like it's eating." Emily leaned closer to her screen. "Can you kill it?" "That's the strange part," Robert replied. "It's not alive, not in any way we understand. It's like, imagine if the end of the universe decided to show up early. These things are like pieces of heat death itself." Their conversation was interrupted by alarms. On every news channel, reporters showed the same images: dark spots appearing over major cities, temperature drops causing instant ice storms, people huddling in shelters as their heaters failed to fight off the supernatural cold. But then Robert noticed something odd. In poorer areas, where people still used old wood stoves and fireplaces, the cold seemed less severe. While high-tech heating systems failed, simple fires kept burning. "Emily," he said suddenly, "remember what the aliens said. Hide your fire." What if they meant it literally? Before she could answer, the power went out completely. Robert's backup generators died too. In the darkness, he could see his breath forming clouds in the freezing air. But something caught his eye. The small camping stove he kept for making coffee was still working, its tiny flame burning bright. He fumbled for his phone, using its light to check the chamber. The dark spot was moving, seeming to reach toward the lab's dead fusion reactor down the hall. But it completely ignored the camping stove's small flame. "They're attracted to advanced energy sources," he said, his fingers shaking as he typed notes. "All our fancy technology, our fusion plants, our quantum generators. They're like dinner bells to these things." The implications hit him hard. Humanity's greatest achievements, clean fusion power, quantum computing, antimatter storage, were now their greatest weaknesses. The very progress that made them advanced was making them vulnerable. In Washington, D.C., Colonel Wright was reaching the same conclusion. He stood in a bunker deep underground, surrounded by military leaders from around the world. On screens above them, satellites showed the void seekers spreading across the globe like ink drops in water. "We need to shut everything down," he announced. "Every fusion plant, every quantum computer, every high-energy facility. We go dark, we go cold, we go primitive." One general stood up angrily. "You want us to step back 100 years? Give up everything we've built." Wright pointed to the screens. "Look at Mars Colony. They had the most advanced technology in the solar system. Now they're a block of ice. We need to adapt, or we'll share their fate. As if to emphasize his point, the bunker's lights flickered and died. In the emergency lighting, frost began forming on the walls. The Void Seekers had found them. But in the darkness, an old oil lamp on Wright's desk kept burning, its flame steady and strong. He stared at it, understanding growing in his eyes. Sometimes the oldest solutions were the best ones. "We don't need to hide our fire," he said quietly. "We just need to change what kind of fire we use." Above ground, the stars continued to vanish one by one. But on Earth, people were already adapting, returning to simpler ways of keeping warm. The universe's greatest predators had come hunting for humanity's heat, but they would learn that humans could make fire in more ways than one. And some fires, the oldest kinds, burned too simply for the void to consume. Lieutenant Karen Martinez floated in the darkness of Space Station Freedom, watching Earth through the observation window. The planet below looked different now, with strange patches of black spreading across its surface like spilled ink. Her job was to coordinate the evacuation of all orbital stations before the Void Seekers reached them. "Station Alpha, do you copy?" She called into her radio. Static answered. Another station gone dark. A flash of light caught her attention. Far in the distance, a new message pod arrived from deep space, burning bright as it entered Earth's orbit. These pods had been arriving for days now, each carrying the last words of dying alien civilizations. "New message incoming," announced the station's computer. "Origin: Proxima Centauri. Species: Luminary." Karen pressed play, and a hologram appeared. The alien looked like a tall, graceful being made of crystal and light. Its voice was translated into English. "To any who still live, we were wrong. Our shields failed. Our sun-forged weapons failed. The void consumes all advanced energy. We thought ourselves gods among the stars, but our power drew them straight to us. We are the 37th civilization to fall this cycle. Our last ships carry our children tow." The message cut off there. Karen closed her eyes, adding another name to the mental list of fallen civilizations. The Luminary had been one of the most advanced species known, with technology that could reshape planets. Now they were gone. "Lieutenant," called out Officer Ben Rogers, "we're getting weird readings from the station's core." Karen pushed off the wall, floating quickly to the control room. The temperature was dropping fast. Ice crystals formed in the air around them, sparkling like tiny stars. "Void Seekers," she whispered. "They're here. Everyone to the escape pods. Now." The crew moved fast, just like they'd practiced. Through the station's windows, Karen could see them. Dark shapes moving through space, drawn to the station's nuclear core like moths to a flame. As she helped the last crew member into a pod, she received one final transmission from Earth. It was Dr. Hayes. "The advanced species fell first," he said, his voice urgent. "Their technology made them targets, but we found recordings from younger civilizations. Some survived longer by staying simple. The Void Seekers can't process basic thermal energy as easily. They..." Static cut him off. Karen launched the escape pods, watching them streak toward Earth like falling stars. She had to manually shut down the station's core before leaving. Someone had to stay behind. Through the station's cameras, she watched the Void Seekers approach. They moved like living shadows, each one absorbing every trace of heat they touched. The station's walls creaked as the metal grew brittle from the impossible cold. "This is Lieutenant Martinez," she recorded into the station's log. "To anyone who finds this, we weren't the strongest, the most advanced, or the wisest species out there. But maybe that's why we have a chance. We remember how to live simply. We remember how to survive." She pulled the core shutdown lever. The station's lights died one by one. In the distance, more alien ships fell to the Void Seekers. She could see their advanced engines flaring bright before going dark forever. Just before leaving in the last pod, Karen grabbed something from her quarters, an old lighter that belonged to her grandfather. As the cold crept in and the station's power died completely, its tiny flame still worked perfectly. Back on Earth, Colonel Wright and his team reviewed the messages from fallen civilizations. Each story was the same. The more advanced the species, the faster they fell. The Void Seekers went after the biggest energy sources first. "Sir," a young sergeant reported, "we're getting signals from survivors, other species, hiding on their worlds. The ones who made it. They're all younger civilizations, ones who still used simple tools and basic fire." Wright looked at the map showing the Void Seekers spread across the galaxy. The pattern was clear now. They'd devoured the most advanced systems first, drawn by their powerful energy signatures. Earth, sitting on the edge of known space, still using many primitive energy sources, had been left for last. "We're not weaker than them," Wright realized. "We're more adaptable. We never fully left our old ways behind." As Karen's escape pod streaked through the atmosphere, she clutched her grandfather's lighter. Above her, Space Station Freedom turned dark and quiet, joining the graveyard of advanced technology in orbit. But below, millions of simple fires still burned in homes across Earth, defying the coming darkness. Humanity wasn't the most advanced species in the galaxy, but they knew how to survive. They knew how to adapt. And most importantly, they remembered the oldest ways of making heat, ways the void could not easily steal. The giants of the galaxy had fallen. Now it was humanity's turn to show what the smaller ones could do. John Cooper had spent his life working on the most advanced engines in the world. Now he found himself building something from the past, a massive steam engine. His workshop in Detroit was filled with the sounds of hammering and welding as his team worked by lamplight. "It looks like something from an old history book," said Sarah Miller, his assistant, wiping sweat from her forehead. They had been working for 3 days straight. "Sometimes old is good," John replied, checking the pressure gauges. "These void seekers can't process simple heat energy, so we're going back to basics." Outside, the city looked strange. All the modern buildings stood dark and cold, their advanced systems shut down to avoid attracting the void. But in the older parts of town, smoke rose from chimneys as people burned wood for heat. Those areas remained warm, protected by their simplicity. John's radio crackled to life. It was Dr. Hayes from MIT. "Cooper, how's the prototype coming?" "First team generator is almost ready," John answered, patting the huge machine. "We're calling it the Hearth Engine. Burns wood and coal, makes steam, turns turbines, just like the old days, but better." His team had taken old steam engine designs and improved them with modern knowledge, while keeping the technology simple enough to avoid detection. The result was a power generator that was both primitive and efficient. "Good," Hayes replied, "because we just lost another fusion plant. The Void Seekers are getting hungrier." Static cut him off as another power grid failed. John looked at his blueprints, spread across a wooden table lit by oil lamps. Next to the steam engine designs were plans for other old technologies: water wheels, windmills, even simple Stirling engines that ran on small temperature differences. "Project Hearth is going worldwide," Sarah said, showing him reports on her hand-cranked radio. "London is converting old factories back to steam power. Tokyo is rebuilding water wheels. Every city is going back to the old ways." But it wasn't just about power generation. People were remembering other old skills too. Farmers went back to using horses instead of tractors. Fishermen returned to sail power. Families learned to cook on wood stoves and keep warm with thick blankets in fireplaces. The first test of the Hearth Engine came at midnight. John's team gathered around as he lit the fire in its belly. The massive boiler began to heat up. Pistons started to move, and the generator began to spin. "Look at the heat readings," Sarah said excitedly, holding up a sensor. "It's working just like we thought. The heat signature is too simple, too spread out. The void can't get a lock on it." Through the workshop windows, they could see the dark spots of void seekers passing overhead, hunting for energy. But they ignored the steam plant completely. To them, its simple heat was like background noise. Within weeks, John's design spread across the country. Cities began to transform. Modern buildings were retrofitted with old heating systems. Underground steam tunnels were rebuilt. People started living differently, finding strength in old ways. Colonel Wright visited the Detroit workshop a month after the first Hearth engine started running. He stood watching the massive machine work, its rhythmic chugging filling the air. "You know what's funny?" he said to John. "All our advanced technology, all our progress, and in the end, we're saved by something from 200 years ago." John shook his head. "Not saved by the old technology, sir. Saved by remembering it. By keeping our old knowledge while we made new things. By not throwing away our history." A group of children ran past, carrying firewood for the boiler. They had adapted quickly to this new world, learning skills their great-grandparents would have known. They didn't see it as going backward, just finding a different way forward. "The Void Seekers expected us to be helpless without our advanced technology," Sarah said, showing Wright the latest efficiency reports. "They didn't know we could still do things the old way." As if to prove her point, the lights in the workshop flickered on, powered by steam and simple mechanics. All across the city, similar lights were appearing, warm and steady. They weren't as bright as the old ones, but they were safe. They were human. In the sky above, stars continued to go dark as the Void Seekers consumed more advanced civilizations. But on Earth, millions of simple fires burned on, defying the darkness with their primitive, unquenchable warmth. Humanity hadn't just remembered its past. It had found its future in it. Dr. Lisa Barnes didn't mean to make her discovery. She was just trying to stay warm in her lab at Chicago University when everything went wrong. The backup generator failed, plunging the building into darkness. As the temperature dropped, she noticed something strange on her thermal camera. "That's impossible," she whispered, watching the screen. The cold was everywhere except for a small circle around her body. While everything else froze, her body heat pushed back against the void. She grabbed her phone and called Dr. Hayes. "Robert, I need you to see something." But before she could explain, the windows exploded inward. Dark shapes poured into the lab like liquid shadow. The Void Seekers had finally reached Chicago in force. Liza ran, clutching her thermal camera. All around her, the city was falling. Modern buildings froze and cracked. Cars stopped working as their engines turned to ice. People rushed toward the underground bunkers that had been built over the last few months. In one of these bunkers, Colonel Wright was getting reports from around the world. "London is down. Moscow is gone. Beijing lost contact an hour ago." His voice was tired but steady. Then Lisa burst in, out of breath but excited. "Colonel, look at this." She showed him the thermal camera footage. "It's not just body heat. It's something else. When people are scared, or determined, or helping each other, their heat signature changes. It becomes stronger." Wright stared at the images. She was right. The thermal patterns around people varied with their emotions. Those who fought back, who helped others, who refused to give up. They glowed brighter. "Get Dr. Hayes on the line," he ordered. But the bunker's power chose that moment to fail. The thick walls groaned as impossible cold pressed in. Ice spread across the ceiling. People huddled together, sharing warmth. But instead of panicking, something strange happened. Lisa watched through her camera as people's heat signatures grew stronger. They weren't just sharing body heat. They were sharing determination, courage, the simple human refusal to give up. "It's like a feedback loop," she said, understanding growing in her eyes. "Our emotions, our will to survive. It creates a kind of heat the void can't process. Something too complex, too human for them to absorb." Above ground, Chicago had become a frozen wasteland. But in the bunkers and old buildings, wherever people gathered together, pockets of warmth remained. Not just physical warmth from simple fires, but human warmth. A week later, survivors from other cities arrived with similar stories. The Void Seekers could freeze anything, but they struggled against large groups of humans. It was as if human emotion itself generated a kind of protective field. Dr. Barnes worked with John Cooper to build what they called community hearths, gathering places that combined simple fire with human presence. The more people worked together, shared stories, helped each other, the stronger the warmth became. "We're not just fighting the cold with fire," Lisa explained to a group of survivors. "We're fighting it with everything that makes us human. Our connections, our emotions, our stubborn refusal to give up." The Void Seekers struck again that night, hitting the bunker with waves of absolute cold. But this time, people were ready. Instead of running, they gathered closer. They told stories, sang songs, shared what little food they had. Through her thermal camera, Lisa watched in amazement as their combined heat pushed back against the void. It wasn't just body temperature, it was something deeper, more fundamental. "They can steal our technology," Colonel Wright said, watching the thermal readings rise. "They can freeze our machines, but they can't take what makes us human." The discovery spread from bunker to bunker, city to city. People learned that their strongest weapon wasn't technology or fire, it was each other. Community became survival. Cooperation became resistance. Lisa named it the Firekeeper Doctrine, the understanding that human warmth, both physical and emotional, was their best defense. In the frozen ruins of Chicago, as around the world, people adapted. They lived in close communities, sharing heat and hope. They kept their fires burning. But more importantly, they kept their humanity burning. The Void Seekers had broken humanity's technology, forced them underground, frozen their cities. But in doing so, they had only proved what humans had always known deep down. Their greatest strength wasn't in their machines, but in their hearts. And that was a fire that could not be frozen. Marcus Sullivan became a hearthkeeper by accident. He had been a high school teacher before the Void came. Now he led one of the largest underground communities in what used to be Denver. "The fire needs more wood," he called out to the gathering in the massive cave they called home chamber. Children ran forward with armfuls of logs, carefully placing them in the giant stone fireplace. But it wasn't just any fire. Dr. William Parker stood nearby, checking readings on his hand-built device. "The emotional output is strong today," he said, smiling. "The community spirit is high." Will had created what people called an emotional reactor, a simple machine that could measure and amplify the special kind of heat that humans generated when they came together. It didn't use any advanced technology that might attract the Void Seekers. Instead, it worked with the natural energy of human emotion. "Story time," a little girl called out. It was an important daily ritual now. People gathered around the fire, sharing tales, keeping spirits high. Marcus watched as the emotional reactor's readings climbed higher. When people share stories, help each other, or even just laugh together, Will explain to a group of newcomers, they create a kind of warmth that the Void can't understand. It's too complex, too alive. Above them, the old city of Denver lay frozen and dark. But underground, a network of tunnels and chambers buzzed with life. People had adapted to their new world in ways nobody expected. Another community called in. Sarah, their radio operator, announced. "Boston Bunker reports they pushed back a Void attack yesterday. They said their emotional reactor actually made the Seekers retreat." This was new. Until now, they had only been able to defend. The idea that they could actually drive the Void back sparked excitement through the chamber. Marcus watched the reactor readings spike with hope. Will rushed over to his workbench, grabbing notes and tools. "If Boston did it, we can too. We just need to understand how." He had been working on a theory that human emotions could be focused, like a lens focusing light. The underground communities were proving it true. When people worked together, shared their hopes and fears, supported each other, they created something the Void couldn't fight. That night, they got their chance to test it. The temperature sensors started dropping rapidly. The Void Seekers had found them. "Everyone together," Marcus called out. Instead of running in fear, the community gathered closer. Children were placed in the center, surrounded by adults. People held hands, sang songs, told jokes even as ice started forming on the chamber walls. Will's reactor hummed louder. "The emotional energy is higher than we've ever recorded," he shouted over the singing. "Keep it up." Marcus felt it, not just the physical warmth, but something deeper. The human need to protect each other, to survive, to keep hope alive. It filled the chamber like a visible force. Through the thick rock walls, they heard something new. A high, thin sound, like crystal cracking. The Void Seekers were retreating. "They can't handle it," Will said, checking his instruments. "This kind of heat, born from human connection and emotion, it's poison to them." The news spread quickly through the underground network. All across the country, communities began testing their strength. They discovered that different emotions created different types of heat. Love burned steady and strong. Courage flared bright and sharp. Hope spread slow and warm like summer sunshine. Marcus walked through the tunnels that evening, checking on his people. In one chamber, teenagers taught younger kids how to read by lamplight. In another, doctors treated patients while community members sang to keep spirits high. Everywhere, people found ways to keep both their bodies and their spirits warm. "We're not just surviving anymore," he told Will later. "We're living. Really living." Will nodded, making adjustments to his reactor. "The Void Seekers came to steal our heat, but they taught us how to make a kind that they can't touch. They made us stronger." In the main chamber, the fire burned bright, fed by wood and community spirit. Above ground, the stars might be going dark, but down here, humanity's light burned brighter than ever. The void had tried to freeze them into extinction. Instead, it had taught them the true meaning of warmth. 1 year after the first Void Seeker attack, Emily Foster stood on a hill overlooking what was once Washington, D.C. The city looked different now. Steam rose from rebuilt chimneys. Windmills turned slowly in the morning light. People moved through the streets, carrying wood, tending fires, helping neighbors. "Ready for the test?" Colonel Wright asked, standing beside her. His hair had gone completely gray in the past year, but his eyes were bright with hope. Emily nodded, holding up her tablet. It showed readings from sensors across the globe. Every community is in position. They're all waiting for the signal. This was humanity's first coordinated counterattack. After months of learning how to push back the void with their emotional energy, they were ready to reclaim the surface. In underground bunkers and shelters around the world, millions of people gathered. Each group had their emotional reactors, designed by Dr. Parker and built by John Cooper's teams. But more importantly, they had each other. "Signal sent," Emily said, pressing the button. "It begins now." Around the world, communities started their emergence. They moved together, carrying their simple fires and their emotional reactors. Where the Void Seekers approached, they were met with something they couldn't understand: the combined warmth of human spirit and simple flame. In Chicago, Dr. Lisa Barnes led her group out of their bunker, watching through her thermal camera as their combined heat pushed back the darkness. In Denver, Marcus Sullivan's community emerged singing, their voices and their warmth creating a shield against the cold. The Void Seekers reacted strangely. Instead of attacking, they began to retreat. Wherever humans gathered in groups, sharing their warmth and determination, the dark spots in space pulled back. "They're learning," Dr. Hayes radioed from Boston. "They're starting to understand that we're indigestible. We're too complex, too warm in ways they can't process." Then something unexpected happened. A new signal appeared, coming from deep space. Emily's old translation program began working automatically. It's another alien species," she said, reading the message. "They've been watching us. They want to know if it's safe to land." More messages followed. Survivors from other civilizations, hidden in the darkness between stars, had seen humanity's resistance. While their own advanced technologies had failed, they watched as Earth's people found a different way to fight. The first alien ship landed 3 days later, in a field outside the rebuilt Denver complex. Its occupants were surprised to find humans waiting with blankets, hot food, and warm fires. "We thought we were the last," the alien leader told Marcus through a translator. "All the great civilizations fell. But you found another way." As weeks passed, more survivors came. Earth became a refuge, not because it was the most advanced planet, but because it was the warmest. Humans taught their new friends about emotional reactors, about the strength found in community, about the power of simple technologies combined with unshakable spirit. Emily's granddaughter, Lucy, stood at the center of the new Washington Memorial. Around her, humans and aliens gathered for the lighting of the eternal flame, a symbol of humanity's resistance. "This flame burns with more than just wood and oil," Lucy announced, holding the torch high. "It burns with our spirit, our determination, our refusal to let the darkness win." As she lit the great brazier, emotional reactors around the world recorded the highest readings ever seen. It wasn't just human emotion anymore. Their alien friends had learned to add their own kinds of warmth to the mix. The Void Seekers still roamed the galaxy, but they avoided Earth now. Some said they had learned to fear it. Others believed they simply couldn't understand it. A planet that fought darkness not with technology, but with the simple, unquenchable fire of spirit. Colonel Wright stood with Emily, watching the celebration. "You know what's funny?" he said. "They came to extinguish our fire. Instead, they made it burn brighter than ever." Emily smiled, looking at the mixed crowd of humans and aliens sharing stories around the eternal flame. "That's the thing about humanity's fire," she said. "The harder you try to put it out, the stronger it burns." Above them, stars still winked out in the distance, but Earth glowed bright and warm, a beacon in the darkness, the planet that had taught the universe a lesson. Sometimes the simplest flames burn the strongest, and the warmest fires come not from technology, but from the heart. The universe had tried to extinguish humanity's fire, but humanity had burned on, unyielding, eternal, warm with the one force the void could never consume: hope.